My name is Ed Thompson, and I am the designer and developer of Evidentia. Evidentia is a software program that's going to help you organize the information in your sources and then to analyze that information such that you can use it as evidence in your research. You're familiar with this screen, I hope, which is the main screen that you'll open into. And the very first thing that we're going to cover in the course is how to identify your source. Over the course of this class, the source that I'm using is a death registry for the town of Woburn, Massachusetts in 1852. Daniel P. Thompson is my ancestor, and that is the entry that we will be working with during the first 2 segments of the class. So the first thing that we want to do is go to the Identify a Source tab. And the Identify a Source tab is what's going to allow us to take our source record and create an entry for it in Evidentia. The very first thing that we're going to want to do is to give the source a title. That title does not have to be the title of the record. The title can be anything we want it to be. And in fact, titles in Evidentia are used to sort the entries in the source list on the left-hand side. Left-hand side, and the citation list on the left-hand side. And you see here that as I tab out of the title screen, that we now have an entry in the source list. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to classify our source. Following best practices in genealogy research, Evidentia is going to invite us to classify our source, the information in the source, and the evidence that information provides for our research question. And we'll touch on each of these very briefly. Select and classification. We cover the basic classifications of a source as either an original record that is close to the event, a derived record, which is usually based on an original record of some sort, or an authored work, like a book. We're not going to cover in depth what each of these mean. There's lots of information available on the internet on these classifications. I am going to classify this particular record as a derived record. Since it's a registry, registries are usually based on original birth certificates, death certificates, some other source. And in fact, if we take a closer look at this registry in a minute, we'll see that it almost looks like someone sat down in one sitting and entered in a lot of the data. So based on those pieces of evidence, I'm classifying this as a derived record. Next thing that Evidentia is going to invite me to do is to give my citation a source. If you think of a source as a book, for example, the citation might be the section of the book that we are interested in, the chapter or the page or the paragraph. And we may reference multiple citations within the same source. So when we give our citation a title, we want to be sure and do it in such a way that we can differentiate quickly between the different citations for the same source record. In this particular case, what I did was Evidentia by default used the title of the source with -cite. And actually, let me see if I can go back. -cite. And what I want to do is I'm going to replace some of that information with the name of the person of interest, as well as the event type or the claim type of interest. In this case, the death of Daniel P. Thompson. Now that's what works for me. Whatever works for you, fine. I've got my new source, and the next thing I want to do is create a citation. I can directly into the citation listing box. I can type into the citation listing box. I can also double-click on the citation listing box, and that will open up a pop-up editor where I can enter in my citation listing. The pop-up editor provides some standard formatting controls that you'll be familiar with. And as I can enter it in, I can copy and paste it, I can format it in italics, whatever I want to do, I can do it in the pop-up editor. And once I'm done, I click on Done, and Evidentia will save the listing in the citation listing box. However, the preferred method of doing a citation listing in Evidentia is to use our template manager, and you'll see why as we proceed. The template manager has a collection of over 250 different citation templates. It's obviously not an all-inclusive list, and there tend to be more templates for US records than for the UK or Australia or New Zealand. However, all of them are, or almost all of them, are based on Evidence Explained or some other authority for citation formats. I can filter the list of records based on some filter text, and that's why it's based on the title. And you can see here that as I select the entry from the list, Evidentia is going to give me a preview of what the citation template looks like. If that's the one I want, so it'll also, if they're ones that Evidentia software has provided, and we have some user-provided ones as well, in the template description, it will tell you what the authority is for that particular citation format. So for this particular one, which is a local vital records listing for a registry, digital image, or a database collection online, the standard is based on Evidence Explained, the second edition, page 457. So if that's the one I want to use, I just hit select. Evidentia now presents me with a list of fields that I can populate, and this makes it easier to enter into the data at the field level, and it will format the listing for me. So I just type in the information in the field, and actually you can't see it because this is a slide, not the actual program. But Evidentia is, as I type, is going to show me the information on the two panels on the right-hand side. So if I move on, you see here that I can actually see what the source listing is going to look like. I can see what the citation listing is going to look like, and make sure that it's something that I'm happy with. Now, one thing I want to mention is that you'll see that there's a scroll bar here. Before I leave, I want to make sure I scroll down to the bottom of this panel and fill out all the fields. Otherwise, I may get only partial information. I've already done that, which is why the preview looks like a valid citation format. But do remember to do that. Do remember to scroll all the way down when you're populating the information in that field. So that's the citation that I want. So I just need to click on the Save Citation button, and Evidentia has placed that citation listing onto the Identify a Source screen for me. And that's all that's required to identify a source. All right, so before we leave here, I want to mention that you can do is you can attach, I showed you earlier that image file, you can actually attach that file to this source record, and you can either attach it to the source or you attach it to the citation. Now, when do you want to choose one versus the other? Well, let's say that you consider the source record to be that vital registry of death entries, and the citation is simply that one row in the death registry that we'll be looking at. So since I have just one page from that death registry, I will probably attach that file to the citation. If I had a PDF of the entire registry, I might attach that to the source. If I have a book, I might attach the title page of the book and the copyright page of the book to the source, and then a copy of the page that I'm referencing to the citation. And any of the citations that you look at will have access to the images attached at the source level as well. And let me show you what I mean by that. So once I clicked on one of those, the first thing that I have to decide is, when I'm working with attachments, do I want to leave the image where it is? In other words, if you've already got a system for organizing your records, Evidentia doesn't have to touch that. So it can just create a link to that entry. Or do you want Evidentia to organize those files for you? In which case, it will create a copy in its own data structure. If you choose to let Evidentia manage those files. You're going to have to create a local storage directory under Settings. I'll show you how to do that real quick. Under Settings, you'll see the Storage tab. You want to select and expand the local storage configuration, and then you want to select the base directory. I'm going to choose the desktop as my base directory, and you'll see here that it actually tells me where my attachments are going to go. They're going to go under the desktop under a directory called Evidentia Software Records, and my backups will go under Evidentia Software Backups. In the database, database is a little bit different. It's not like other systems where the database is exposed, so that's protected. So whether you decide to link your records or manage them is totally up to you. But you're going to have to do two things after you've decided what you want to do. First thing you're going to do is create a caption record, and by default, it's going to assign the citation title. And then you're going to have to select a source type, and that will help Evidentia to organize those attachments. So this is a death record, so I'm going to choose death. You see here I changed the caption to say Daniel Page Thompson Death Registry, and I chose the death entry as the source type. Now I click on Attach, and you'll see at the bottom of the page there's now a it's called a chip that shows the attachment. The pencil icon on the left-hand side of the chip allows you to edit this based off of the screen that we were just on. The delete icon on the right-hand side of the chip allows you to delete this attachment. It will not actually delete the file, or I think believe it asks you if you want to delete the file. It'll just unattach it from this source record. And if I double click or click on the actual chip itself, it will open up the original file that I'm working with. So it's an easier way to access your files and organize those files. I want to touch on one more thing. So on this first screen, only the fields that are required are present. But if I move past to the Details tab, you can see all the fields that were in the original. And some of the things that you didn't see previously, the source listing, when the citation listing got created, the sort listing got created as well. You just can't see it on that first screen. There's a place for you to put source notes. So if you wanted to indicate something specific about the source, you can do that here. There's also a place to create citation notes. So put the source notes, use source notes if it applies to the entire source. Use citation notes if it applies just to the portion of the record that you're looking at. I'll note a couple other things. If you know the family search ID for this citation, you can indicate that on this screen. And then there are also several other things that you can do from this screen that you can't do from the Streamline screen. So let's talk about cataloging a claim. So I've identified my source. Next thing I want to do is catalog the information in the source that I am interested in. And of course, I do that by selecting the Catalog Information tab. Catalog Information tab is going to invite me to enter in a sentence. This record claims that. And if I were to go back to the record that we're looking at, this record claims that Daniel P. Thompson died October 17th, 1852 in Woburn, Massachusetts. Now I put Massachusetts in brackets because it doesn't actually say Massachusetts, but if I go to the header of the record, it is a record for Woburn, Mass. So generally what you want to capture in the first column is what the record says, and you don't want to do any, you don't want to imply anything, you don't want to analyze it in any way. If a name is misspelled, you want to keep it misspelled because this is what the record says. Any of those things you want to do, you'll deal with in the analysis, which we'll do it in a few moments. Now here I just typed it directly into the box, and then I could add another claim row and do the next one. I can also double click on the box, and again it will open up a pop-up editor for me. Gives me a little bit more space, and I can do the formatting. So here I can enter in the exact same thing, and when I select done, it will populate the row just as if I'd entered it directly in the box. However, the preferred way to enter in claims in Evidentia is to use the mini editor, and people who find out about the mini editor love the mini editor, and let me show you why. So I click on mini editor, and what I get is this small box that always stays on top. So instead of hopping back and forth between screens, what I can do is hover that directly over the image and enter in my data. And in fact, I can expand the box and use it as a ruler to go across the entire record. So here I can enter in at October 17th, 1852 in Woburn, Mass. I forgot how I'd set up this animation, excuse me. And then when I'm done, I can click on the little submit button, or I can use the Control Enter, and that's true on the Mac or the PC. And once I do, the record is automatically created back in the Evidentia screen. However, I do not have to go back to the Evidentia screen to find that, and I don't have to do screen hopping. So what I was finding before the mini editor came out was that I was bopping back and forth between screens to type things into the claim box, and that was obviously an opportunity for error. So with the mini editor, I just hover it directly under what I'm working on and enter in. He was 54 years of age when he died. Control Enter, and I'm on to my next point. He was married when he died. Enter. He worked as a trader when he died. Control Enter. I can scroll it down to the end of the box. Oh, look here. It says that he was born in Guilford, New Hampshire, to David and Rachel, who I know is David and Rachel Thompson. Control Enter. And that he died of consumption of the blood. Control Enter. And now when I go back to the screen, you see that all those records got created. So that's the advantage of the mini editor. It lets me create multiple entries at the same time without screen hopping. Now the next thing I need to do, just like classified our source, I want to classify the information in the source. Now we use the standard categories. The information came from primary informant, someone with first-hand knowledge of that information. Secondary informant, someone who had second-hand knowledge of that information. Maybe it was at a further away from the event. Or undeterminable, which means I don't know if the person who provided the information had primary access to that information or secondary access to that information. Now, in the case of this death registry, I'm not really sure. It's a registry, so it's a derived record. That doesn't mean all the time that it's secondary informant, but I don't know who provided the information. So I have labeled all of these as indeterminable. However, I want to make the point. An informant can be primary for some of the information in a record, and secondary, and secondary for other information. So, for instance, a wife providing information during the census might be a secondary informant about where her husband was born, since she wasn't actually there, but she would be a primary informant for what his current occupation was, because she knows what he does for a living. So, in this example, I'm putting indeterminable for all of them, but I don't want you to think that you always classify everything the same way just because they came from the same source. Each piece of information should be evaluated separately. That raises another question. We'll come to the double clicking here in a minute. How do I decide how to break down? I've got a claim that says when and where he died. I've got another one that says what he died of. And I'll be honest with you, that's as much art as science. There's no strict rules. But one rule of thumb is if it's likely that some of the information in a claim is primary and some of it is secondary, you will want to break it down into two separate entries on this screen. So I've recorded the information as the record reports it. I've classified that information. Now I want to tag that information with the person of interest I believe it relates to. So on the inside of the screen, Daniel P. Thompson is just some guy named Daniel. I don't know if it's my ancestor or not. However, I believe it is my ancestor, and so I want to tie it to my ancestor. I double-click in the box. Evidentia first will show me what the claim was that I'm working with. Oops. First shows me what the claim was that I'm working with. And then what I want to do is I'm going to want to select the claim type. So in this case, if I space, it gives me a list of claim types for me to choose from. Now, where does that list come from? Well, if I go over here to the little hamburger menu, and I know it's a little bit difficult to see because it's grayed out in the background, that will take me, it'll drop down a manager window. I want to select the list manager, and in the second tab of the list manager, you'll see is for claim types. Evidentia comes pre-populated with all the standard claim types that are traditionally used in a GEDCOM file or in your genealogy program. You may refer to them as facts or events. We've got a relatively thorough list. However, you can also create your own. So if you want to create your own claim types, you're welcome to. Somebody wanted siblings, and so we added siblings. That's not a standard claim type in a lot of programs, but it was certainly a valid thing to do research on, so that was fine. The one thing that you want to be sure when you add your own is this mode section at the bottom. Be sure to choose whether this applies to an individual, a couple, or a parent-child relationship. And that'll be important when you fill out claims back on the Tag Claims screen. So where do claim types come from and where can you add new ones? You want to go to the List Manager and choose the Claim Types tab. So here I've entered in death as a claim type, and you'll see here that it's added the death chip. And then I started to type in the name of, the name of the person that I believe that is talking about, Thompson Daniel Page. Now at this point, it didn't pop up the drop down for me, so Thompson Daniel Page isn't on my subject list yet. So I typed it in, and I want to be sure, since it didn't pull up a drop-down list, and I'm adding a person for the first time, that I hit Enter when I leave this screen. And when I do that, Evidentia, and here we're going back to the List Manager, will create an entry for Daniel Page Thompson on the Subject tab of the List Manager. And a couple things on this tab. I've got to work on some of these animations, obviously. You can enter in new persons from this tab. In this particular case, Daniel Page Thompson was entered on the previous screen, so you can add them on the fly. And you can also use the import GEDCOM. This is the only information that we do import from a GEDCOM, is if you want to pre-populate Evidentia with list of subjects that you are working with. You can do that by importing a GEDCOM. Now, warning bells, ding, 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 ding. Don't import 20,000 people. Evidentia can't keep up, and there's not enough time in your life to research 20,000 people in Evidentia. A few hundred is good. Probably there's a soft limit of about 2,000. And again, that's a lot of people. You're going to be scrolling a lot when you pick lists. So you may just want to deal with the people that you're working with, or one side of the family, etc. And I'll show you how to create a separate database a little bit later on for, like, if I was researching for a client or researching and I want to keep my spouse and my direct lines separate. I'll show you that later. Anyway, this is where you manage your list of subjects and can add or import new ones. You can also merge two subjects from this screen. All right, so back on this screen, you'll see now that I've got a chip for Daniel Page Thompson. That means this is ready to go. The subject has really been added. It's gray because I didn't assign a gender to Daniel Page. If I went back and did that in the List Manager, he would show up as blue. I know, blue for boys, pink for girls. Forgive me for for being predictable. Now the next thing I want to do is select the Add Tags button, and you'll see that a row has been created in the table underneath. Now I can add more claim types here, and you'll see that in a moment. If I wanted to change it from Daniel Page Thompson to somebody else, I need to click on that trash can, delete this one, and add back a new one. If I've got another Daniel P. Thompson in my database, and I'm not sure which one this death record refers to, I could tag them both and then sort that out during my analysis. Unlike where you attach a record in your tree software, whatever tree software you happen to use, usually that means you're pretty confident that that relates to that one person. You do not have to be sure in Evidentia. This is a whole analysis phase that we're going to be looking at in just a moment. And you see here when I exit that an entry's been created in the column on the right-hand side, saying that the information that Daniel P. Thompson died October 17, 1852, is now linked to the death of Daniel Page Thompson, my ancestor. Does that mean it's definitely that person? No, it does not. That means that I'm going to try and prove that later. A little bit different here is the parent-child relationship. So the claim that Daniel P. Thompson was born in Guilford, New Hampshire to David and Rachel Thompson provides evidence for all parent-child relationships are from the side of the child. I'll show you when I pull up reports that later on the reports will correctly reflect the parent-child relationship, but when you're tagging the relationship, you'll always pick child or foster child or biological child or whatever, and then you'll choose a parent. Here I've chosen Rachel Brown because I believe Rachel Thompson is Rachel Brown, and I'm going to select her. Let me see how so child, and now I'm selecting Daniel Page Thompson. You'll see here I've got child. Here's the parent. Here's the child. Notice he's blue now because I went in and updated his gender. And now when I add the tag, boom, boom, I've got Daniel Page Thompson is the child of David Thompson, which I had entered in earlier, and Daniel Page Thompson is the child of Rachel Brown. Now when I actually pull up the program in a little bit, I'll show you what it looks like when there's even more tags for the same claim. And when I go back, you'll see now that I've got two entries tied to that little piece of information. And actually, I could tie in a third because it tells me he was born in Guilford, so that tells me something about his birth as well. Okay, so let's talk about analyzing your evidence. So again, I want to pick the third tab from the main screen or from whatever screen that I'm on, and it'll give me the Analyze Evidence screen. Now to analyze evidence, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to select a subject, select a claim type. When I select a subject, so here I've selected Daniel Page Thompson, the only claim types that are going to come up are the claim types I actually have at least one piece of information attached to. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 claim types in the list. That's because I have at least one piece of information tagged as evidence for this claim type. So I'm going to, since we've been working with the death record, I'm going to select death. And what Evidentia has done is gone through the entire database and pulled back all of the evidence that I tagged with Daniel Page Thompson with the event type of death. Jane, you've got another question. Not speaking to accuracy, but to column 3 of the 3x3 grid, direct, indirect, negative evidence. That classification is going to be done on this screen, Jan, not on the last screen. So it can be direct, it can be indirect, it can be negative. It's just relevant to the research question if you define the research question as subject and claim type. What is Evidentia presenting to me on this screen? Well, it's going to present me the evidence. So it gives me the what the title of the citation is, as well as what the citation says. It's going to show me that source classification that I did on that first screen, so that when I'm comparing records, I have my source classification with me. It's going to give me my information classification, and it's going to give me my evidence classification. Now notice here that it says you have not yet classified the evidence as direct, indirect on negative or negative. That's because I'm going to do that on this screen. So I do that under the select classification, and as Jen has already mentioned, we can classify evidence as direct, which means it speaks directly to the question, indirect, which means by itself it doesn't tell me much, but when combined with other information, I can, it's evidence for my research question, or negative evidence. And I'll actually show you an example of negative evidence that I use a little bit later as well. So this particular information is direct because it actually tells me when this record believes he died. Now, it doesn't have to be accurate to be direct. It just has to give me a direct answer to the question. If the question is when and where did Daniel Page Thompson die, this tells me when and where he died. The book that we'll look at in just a moment will tell me the same thing. So we see here that now that I've classified it as direct, that the red has gone away, and it actually tells me what my classification is. Now, sometimes it's showing a little too much information, and I'd rather see more entries on the screen, because one of the advantages of Evidentia is it shows me all the evidence on the same screen. And if I click this little up arrow, it will hide the classification information and just give me the citation title and what the claim is telling me. And now you can see that I'm looking at that all the death information I have is from two records. One is the Massachusetts Vital Records, which is the one that we've been working with so far, and one was the book, The Vinton Memorial. Now, the interesting thing here about these two records is that the Vital Records tells me that he died on October 17th, and the book tells me he died on October 7th. Now, when I was screen hopping between these two entries, I didn't see the difference. I didn't see that one said 17th and one said 7th. But now that I see them side by side, it pops out at me. Obviously, most obviously, it's probably just a transcription error, but which one is correct? I need to account for that in my analysis. Now, I can just start typing in the analysis box. Evidence is from a government record, and that it occurs closest to the event based on all the evidence I've collected so far. And so I believe that this evidence is stronger than an authored work, which is the Vinton Memorial. And then I can double click in the box instead. And again, that will open up the pop-up editor. And I can do whatever formatting that I want to do in the pop-up editor. So there's what the claim is. And I can enter in the exact thing. I can bullet point it. I can copy and paste. I can put in links. I can also, if I want to, if I click on this little cross over Lorraine, I can actually insert a citation for a reference directly into my analysis. Don't have a lot of time to cover that today, but you can read about it in the help tab. So I believe this was compiled at a later date from the government record, and it's likely that a transcription error occurred when the book was being written. So not the deepest analysis. I may want to say a little bit more, strengthen that argument, but at least I've analyzed it. And because I've analyzed it, notice the green check marks on the right-hand side. Now, we still have to write our conclusion. We've got multiple pieces of information that we're using as evidence. What is my final conclusion? But Evidentia is going to be sure that before you write your final conclusion, that you've classified your source, classified your information, and classified the evidence, and that you've written an analysis for each piece of evidence. It doesn't have to be complex analysis. It just has to be there. And once it does, these check marks will go from gray to green, letting you know that you can now write your conclusion by clicking on the conclusion box. So I'm going to write my conclusion in the summary conclusion, and again, you can double click this to pop up an editor. And my conclusion is that based on current evidence, Daniel Page Thompson, October 17th, 1852, in Woburn, Massachusetts. Now, one of the arguments that could be missing in this analysis, and I would probably want to account for it, is how do I know that Daniel P. Thompson is my Daniel Page Thompson? So I probably should make that argument in my analysis as well, but at least based on the current evidence, this is the conclusion that I'm drawing. Now, if I want to export this into a GEDCOM file or use it in the cousin tracker or use it somewhere else, I don't need a conclusion field. I need to know the actual date and place, and I can enter that here. And that way, when I export this into a GEDCOM file and import it into RootsMagic or Legacy or Family Tree Maker or upload it to Ancestry.com, these are the fields that it will pull from. A couple more things on this screen, and we're almost to the end of the slideshow presentation, and I'll crank up Evidentia itself and show you a couple things that I didn't do in the slides. But I want to show you the fields on the right-hand side of the screen. So there's three fields: review, inconclusive, and disproven. The in review field, I should say in review, not review. Evidentia has determined that evidence was deleted or new evidence was added to this research question, and Evidentia itself will flag this conclusion as needing review. Once you've reviewed it and either updated it or maybe it's still valid, you need to be the one to uncheck that word. Inconclusive may mean that you're not confident in the written conclusion, that yes, I've written a conclusion based on what I know so far, but I really do need more evidence. And disproven may be that the evidence does not support the research assumption. So maybe somebody else told me that Daniel Page Thompson died, that this was my Daniel Page Thompson, and in my analysis I account for the fact that no, this is not my Daniel Page Thompson. I want to save that analysis so that I can share that with somebody, but I'm disproving something instead of proving it, and I can flag it with the disproven checkbox. So in review is set by the program and needs to be unset by you. Inconclusive and disproven are both set by you, the user, and unset by you, the user. Nancy asked a question: is there some reason you use month, day, year rather than day, month, year format as text? So it doesn't have to be in a specific format. A couple other things on this screen. The date calculator will let you perform date range calculations. I'm not going to pop that up here, but I use it, for instance, if it tells me so-and-so was, well, okay, so this record told me that he was 54 when he died. I knew that he died October 17th, 1852. So if I use the date calculator, it'll give me a date range, and I might use that in my analysis of birth of Daniel Page Thompson. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the date calculator, and I encourage you to play with that and check out the user guide on that. You can add research notes to this research question, and those notes will appear on the research summary report, and they will appear on the proof report. And speaking of the proof report, oh, all right, okay. You can also generate a proof report directly from this screen. Now, I'm not going to do that from here. I'm going to take you to the report manager first. And we do that by going into the little hamburger menu and selecting report manager. A couple things about the report manager, and then I'll actually demo live reports. I want to be sure and set a preparer these reports. That will be used to populate the author field. I can select a report format, which will either be a web page, HTML, or PDF. If you save it as HTML, you can actually open it up in Word and then edit it in Word. You can copy and paste it, whatever you want to do. And then it also will allow you to select different fonts. So I actually like Courier, which is a typewriter font, but most people don't. There's a whole slew of fonts that you can select on this screen. So before you generate any reports, I recommend that you make sure you set these on the report manager screen. So here we've got Evidentia, and actually I've got a database loaded that I've already worked with. So a couple things I want to show you. If I select vital records for Massachusetts, You'll see here, here's an example where I've got a citation with multiple, a source with multiple citations. This is a collection in the American Ancestors website, and I've got vital record entry for my ancestor Charles, his marriage, his death, Daniel H. Thompson, etc. So here's an example of creating a citation from multiple sources. A couple other things on settings I wanted to show you. You have some nifty themes if you don't like my green on gray. There are other themes that you can choose from. I don't recommend the gray one. I use that for screenshots for books, if the books are going to be in black and white. All of these are documented in the book. Third-party tools. If you want to integrate directly with Family Search, and you have a Family Search Family Tree account, if you give Evidentia your Family Search username and your Family Search password, and you authorize Family Search access, then we can pull and push data to and from Family Search. And I'll be doing a video on that in the near future. I wanted to show you, because people always ask, well, what if I have like a census record and there's multiple people in the census record? Excellent question, Ed. Like, so here I've got a, this is back in your land, Woburn girl. Here I've got the 1840 census for Woburn, and actually that's not a good example. Let me pull up 1850 census for Woburn. And here it's the claim that, as I chose to record it, is on June 1st, which is the enumeration date for this census, 1850. Daniel P. Thompson lived in Woburn, Mass. with Fanny G. Richardson Thompson and Walter C. Thompson. Now, Richardson was not in the, why I have it in brackets. That means I added it editorially. That's a reminder to me. The claim is that Fanny G. Thompson lived with him. So what does that look like? What does this tell me about Daniel Page Thompson et al.? And if I look at the claims, you'll see here, well, it tells me something about Walter C. Thompson's residence, about Fanny Richardson's residence, about Daniel Page Thompson's residence. It tells me something about a spousal relationship, possible spousal relationship between Fanny G. Richardson and Daniel Page Thompson. It tells me if I'm arguing that Walter C. Thompson is the child of Daniel Page Thompson, this helps support that. And that Walter C. Thompson is also the child of Fanny G. Richardson. This helps me support that. And basically, this claim will appear in the analysis as evidence for any of those claim types. So that's what it looks like if I've got to deal with multiple people in the same record, like I frequently would in a census record. Meg, silly question. Hopefully it's not. But how do I make my sources list on the left-hand side of my screen rather than on the right-hand side? Meg, you're in luck. Go to the settings. I almost forget this is there because I just don't deal with it. And I can do my source list on the right. And boom, why did I leave that on gray? I hate the gray. Go to teal. Teal is a nice change. So yes, if you're left-handed or right-handed or just left-eyed or right-eyed and you prefer your list on the other side like it was in version 2, you can switch that. I do want to talk about the cousin tracker. This was a popular addition I put in about 3 months after Evidentia 3 came out. And the idea behind the cousin tracker is we get all these shaky leaves. We get maybe DNA matches, or we get notifications of matches on other websites. And for me, I thought it would be nice if I had a way of tracking my research. So let's say I get a DNA match. And I need to correct that to MRCA. So I get a DNA match, and I'm Edward Thompson. And it says that, hey, there's a guy named Russ Worthington. You may know Cousin Russ. And I got a DNA match. It says Russ and I are cousins. That's not actually true, but so the first thing to do is identify who do they say our most recent common ancestor is, and I just pick them from the list, or I can add them. I'm just going to make one up. I can add my direct line between Edward Allen Thompson and Ada Bell Basham. I can add as many here as I want to. I'm just faking it out here. I can add what Russ's direct line to Ada Bell is. Again, I'm just making stuff up here. And I'm going to make this a little more flexible, and then I can save it. I'm not going to save this. And what I'm going to show you is this is the one that actually we did get from the We're Related app on Ancestry.com. So this says that I, Edward Allen Thompson, am related to Samuel Allen through multiple generations, and Russ Worthington from Dear Myrtle and the Worthington blog is also related to Samuel Allen. Well, so this is possible cousin connection. Are we really ninth cousins, which is what this says we are? So this shows what I need to prove, and as I prove each relationship, and I'm going to do that individually, it tells me that, okay, Edward Allen Thompson is related to Raymond Edward Thompson. Raymond Edward Thompson is the son of Raymond Brooks. Raymond Brooks is the son of Lee Francis. And as I prove each one of these links, the goal is to prove all the way up to the most recent common ancestor. And then to either have Russ prove the same thing, or for me to work my way down from the top to prove that Russ and I are cousins. Russ and I are not cousins. There's a break in this link. I can actually prove, I didn't finish it here, but I can actually prove a link all the way to Samuel Allen on my side. But this Samuel Allen is not the one who has Benjamin Allen as the as a son. So this is where Ancestry got it wrong. But this is a good way to track your research, and I can print off reports showing where I am in my current research. And reports, we did all this great work, and what do we have to show for it? Well, let me show you what we have to show for it. So let me go back. I'm going to go back to my ancestor David, who's my 5th great-grandfather, and I'm going to ask Evidentia to create a proof report about David's birth. And I hit proof, and Evidentia is going to create for me, in the other window naturally, in this case a PDF, proof report about his birth. Because I added the preparer on that report screen, it shows me as the author. Okay, I admit Courier looks hideous on this. Here's my conclusion, verbose than the one I did for you today. And each of the sources I considered when I reached that conclusion. And because we do all that boring stuff at the beginning when we create citation listings, well, here's my research notes. I told you you could add research notes. And here's where they get added in the report. And here's all my citations properly formatted. And this is the information, by the way, that can be exported into a GEDCOM file and imported into your family tree software. So you get not only places and dates, but you also get the citations, and your analysis gets stored in notes fields. Jan, if we are keeping track of a direct line, but we don't have a cousin to match to, can we enter just one side of the cousin tracker? No, I don't think it'll let you do that, Jan. I mean, that would be a good way to get by for now. You could fake the other line on the other side, and you just create some dummy names and create a fake cousin and do it that way for now. But I'll try and get the direct line tracker in the next couple months. Lana, I want to use this program for We're Related. Yeah, Russ Worthington and I had a good time. Because I had just come out with the cousin tracker, and the information came out that Ancestry thought we were related, and we actually took that afternoon. He was online, I was online, and we kind of raced to prove, at least with minimal evidence, that we were or were not cousins. And the cousin tracker helped me to do that, because I knew each link that I needed to prove, and each name that I needed to look for. Now you still have to do the work on the analysis screen. The cousin tracker doesn't do that for you. It is a tracker. It is not an analysis tool, except that it shows you your progress. The other report I want to show you, and there's lots of reports, but is the everything report, the research summary report. So this time I'm going to pull up and do a research summary report. I should have picked a different font. Should I? Maybe I will pick a different font just to show you. Let's do it in Palatino. Now, there's no guarantee that your operating system has Palatino, although the list is supposed to reflect what's in your operating system. But these are some of the things that will look different on a Mac and a PC. And this is, yeah, it looks like this is the research summary report. Now, it's missing some names here. I'll have to look into that for the child. But this shows me everything that I've got evidence for in summary format. And then, boom, evidence for the birth of Rachel Brown. This is everything that would be in the proof report, whether I have a proof or not, whether I've analyzed it or not. And everything, you notice these little footnote citations. Then I've got evidence for the burial of Rachel Brown, evidence for the that Elijah Brown was a child of Rachel Brown, evidence that Brown is the child of Susanna Morrill. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I have a lot of them in my ancestry tree. Evidence of the death of Rachel Brown. This is everything that I've collected at least one piece of information for in Evidentia. And this is a great report for tracking your research, identifying gaps in your research, and trying to figure out where you want to go next. Also useful if you're writing a narrative. Have this report right in front of you. This is all the information you've collected in Evidentia about this person. So that's one of my favorite reports.